I paid for my brother's entire wedding honeymoon, $3,400 out of my own savings, and found out 3 weeks later that his wife had told every single guest at the reception that the trip was a gift from their church group. Not from me. Not even close to me. That's not where the story starts, though. That's just where I stopped pretending. My name doesn't matter much to this. What matters is that I'm the older one. The one who figured things out early, moved out at 19, worked 2 jobs through community college, transferred to a 4-year school, graduated without debt because I was terrified of it. I became a nurse. Not a doctor, not a surgeon, but a nurse who worked night shifts in a cardiac unit for 6 years and learned exactly how fragile things are. Bodies, trust, time. My brother Fletcher is 3 years younger. He was always the one people worried about in the good way, the charming one. The one who made my dad laugh at dinner when the rest of us were too tired. He was never cruel. That's the thing I keep having to remind myself. He wasn't mean. He just never thought about the cost of anything, because someone was always absorbing it quietly. For most of his life, that someone was me. It started small, the way these things always do. $100 here when he couldn't make rent in his early 20s. A loan for a car down payment that became a gift when he hit a rough patch. I told myself it was fine. I told myself family takes care of each other. I told myself a lot of things that sounded true because I needed them to be. Then he met his wife. I'll call her what she is, his wife. And things shifted in a way I didn't notice at first because I was too busy being happy for him. She was bright, funny, the kind of person who fills a room without trying. Their first year together, I saw them constantly. Their second year, I noticed I was hearing about things after they happened. Dinners I wasn't invited to. A trip upstate that was apparently just a small group. A birthday party for her that my brother mentioned in passing, weeks later, like it was already old news. I told myself I was reading into it. When Fletcher called me 11 months before the wedding, he sounded the way he always sounds when he needs something. Warm, a little sheepish. Already laughing before the ask. He said they'd been saving, but between the venue deposit and her family's financial stuff, they were tight. He said he wasn't asking for a gift, just a loan. He said he'd pay it back within a year. He said, and I remember this exactly, because I've thought about it many times since. You know I'm good for it, sis. I transferred $3,400 within a week. I didn't ask for a repayment agreement. I didn't ask for a timeline in writing. I trusted him the way I always had, the way you trust someone you've known your whole life, the way that isn't really trust anymore. It's just habit. He thanked me once, in a text, with a gif of someone bowing. I saved the screenshot. Not because I was suspicious, just because something in me, some quiet part that had been taking notes without my permission, knew it might matter later. The wedding was in June, in a small town outside of Columbus, Ohio. Venue was a converted barn with string lights and wood floors that creaked in a satisfying way. It was genuinely beautiful. I wore a dress I'd bought on sale months before, forest green, and I did my own hair because I wasn't in the bridal party. That had been communicated to me in a text from my brother that said, "We're keeping it super small up front. Hope that's okay." It wasn't okay, but I said it was. I sat at a table with 2 of his college friends I barely knew, and my mother's sister, who is sweet but talks exclusively about her cats and her weather app. I watched my brother dance with his wife, watched them cut the cake, watched the toasts. I smiled through all of it the way you smile when you've practiced smiling at hard things. Then came the toast from his wife's maid of honor, a woman named something floral. I genuinely don't remember. She was that forgettable, and she listed everyone who had made this day possible. She thanked the parents. She thanked the venue coordinator. She thanked the church group by name, specifically, for the beautiful honeymoon gift. She thanked 3 other people I'd never met. She sat down. My name was not on that list. I waited. I thought maybe Fletcher would say something during his toast. He thanked his wife's parents, thanked his best man, thanked everyone who showed up and showed love. He made a joke about the Wi-Fi password at the venue. He sat down. My name was not said once in that building. I drove 3 hours to get there. I spent $3,400 of my savings on a trip to a coastal resort in South Carolina that I had never been to myself. I sat at a table near the back, where the AC wasn't working properly. And at the end of the night, when I hugged my brother and said I loved him, and that it was a beautiful wedding, he hugged me back and said, "It really came together, right? It came together." Right. The drive home was long. I had a playlist, but I turned it off about 40 minutes in and just drove in silence, which is not something I normally do. I'm not a silence person. I fill quiet with podcasts or music or phone calls. But that night, I just needed to hear nothing, because the alternative was hearing my own thoughts too loudly. I got home around midnight, fed my cat, made tea I didn't drink, sat on my couch in my dress because I was too tired to change. My phone had a few texts. My aunt saying it was a lovely ceremony. One of the college friends saying it was nice to meet me. A forwarded email from my mother with the subject line, "Photo from today." I opened it and there were about 15 wedding photos. I was in exactly one, standing slightly to the left of a group shot, partially blocked by someone's shoulder. That was the beginning of the end of my silence. 3 weeks later, I ran into a woman at the grocery store who attended the wedding. A friend of his wife's family. We didn't know each other well, but we'd been introduced briefly at the reception. She stopped me in the produce section and said, "Your brother's honeymoon looked incredible. I saw the photos. That church group really came through for them, didn't they?" I stood there holding a bag of apples. I said, "Yeah." I said it so automatically that I was already 3 steps away before I understood what I'd just done. I had confirmed the lie without even meaning to. It was that easy. That's how smoothly it had all been set up. Not even a trap. More like a groove everyone was already moving along, and I just stepped into it without thinking. I put the apples back. I didn't buy anything. I went home and sat at my kitchen table for a long time. Then I opened my bank app and looked at the transfer. $3,400. Sent 11 months ago. 0 repayments. I had told myself I was tracking it loosely, that I'd bring it up when the time felt right, that I didn't want to make things awkward around the wedding. The wedding had come and gone. No one had brought it up. No one had mentioned it at all. I pulled up Fletcher's contact and started typing. Then I stopped. Then I started again. Then I put the phone down. I wasn't angry yet. Not the hot, loud kind. I was something slower and colder than angry. I was calculating. I was thinking about every time I'd told myself things were fine, every time I'd absorbed something without saying a word, every amount I'd given, or lent, or quietly written off because it felt easier than the conversation. I didn't sleep much that night. What happened next came from a direction I didn't expect. My cousin, my mom's sister's daughter, who I am not particularly close to, but who has always been observant in a way that makes people slightly uncomfortable, texted me on a random Thursday evening. She said she'd seen a Facebook post from my brother's wife and thought I should know what it said. She asked if she could screenshot it to me. I said yes. The post was in a closed Facebook group for their church. My cousin had been added years ago when she visited with my aunt and never removed herself. The post was from his wife. It was thanking the group for the generous honeymoon gift. And this is the part that made me sit down. It included a paragraph about how the newlyweds had funded most of the wedding themselves. How they'd been disciplined and intentional with money. How they were so proud of what they'd built with their own hands. Their own hands. I read it 3 times. Then I read it a 4th time in case something had changed. I forwarded it to my phone's notes app. Then I went and found every bank transfer confirmation email I had. The original $3,400. And also, because I'd gone looking now that I was looking, a $900 transfer from 8 months before the wedding that had been described to me as just to cover her dress alterations and some vendor deposits. And before that, $600 when they'd needed first and last month's rent on a new apartment. $4,900 total. I had given them $4,900 over 18 months, and my name had been erased from the story of how they built their life together. I didn't post anything. I didn't call Fletcher. I sat with it for 4 days, which is the amount of time I apparently need to move from devastation into clarity. On the 5th day, I called my mother. My mother is complicated. Aren't they all? But she is fundamentally honest in a way that sometimes makes her hard to be around. She doesn't soften things. She was quiet for a long time after I told her. Not the processing kind of quiet. The already knew kind. I asked her, "Did you know?" She said, "I suspected." I asked her what she meant by that. She told me that at the reception, she'd overheard his wife telling her own mother that the honeymoon worked out because they'd gotten help from a few places. My mother had assumed Fletcher would say something to me. She'd assumed wrong. She hadn't said anything because she didn't want to start something before the wedding was over. The wedding was over. I told her I was going to say something now. She said, "Be careful." I told her I'd been careful for years. I think that might have been the most honest thing I'd said to her in a long time. I called Fletcher the next morning. Not a text, a call. He picked up on the third ring, sounding normal, a little distracted, like he was in the middle of something. I said, "I need to talk to you about the money." Silence. Then, "Which money? Which money?" There was more than one pot of money we could have been talking about, apparently. I said, "The $3,400, and the $900, and the $600 before that." He was quiet for longer this time. Then he said, "I told you I'd pay it back." I said, "You told me the $3,400 was a loan. You didn't say anything about the other amounts. And none of it has been paid back. And your wife told your entire church group that you two funded the wedding yourselves." Another silence. He said, "That's not. That was just for the group. It was just." Fletcher. He stopped. I said, "I found out from a stranger in a grocery store. She congratulated me on the church group's generosity." I stood there and said, "Yeah." He didn't say anything. I said, "I need you to understand that I am not calling to fight with you. I am calling to tell you that I know what happened, and I need you to tell me the truth about whether you're going to pay me back." He said he would. He said things had been tight. He said they'd been meaning to bring it up. He said his wife didn't always think about how things sounded to other people. He said a lot of things that weren't quite apologies, but were arranged to sound like them. I said I needed a number and a timeline, in writing, before the end of the week. He said okay. He did not send anything by the end of the week. I waited until the following Tuesday, then I sent a simple email. Not a text, an email, with a paper trail, recapping the 3 amounts, the dates, and the conversation we'd had. I said I was happy to set up a payment plan and asked him to confirm receipt. He did not reply. His wife called me 3 days later. I want to describe this call accurately because it matters. She was not yelling. She was doing something more exhausting than yelling. She was being reasonable in a way that felt designed to make me seem unreasonable. She said she understood I was upset. She said Fletcher was really stressed right now. She said they were both grateful for everything I'd done. She said the Facebook post had been misunderstood, that she was just talking about the work they'd put into planning, not financial contributions. I said, "You specifically thanked the church group for the honeymoon gift. I paid for the honeymoon." She said, "That's a bit of an oversimplification." I sat with that sentence for a moment. Then I said, "Is it?" She said that money within a family is complicated, and that she'd hoped I understood the spirit of what they were doing, and that she didn't think it was fair for me to be holding this over them right now when they were just starting their lives together. I said, "I'm not holding it over you. I'm asking you to acknowledge it and pay it back." She said, "I think we all need to take a breath." I said, "I've been taking a breath for 18 months. The call ended shortly after that. Not dramatically. She just said she had to go and that she hoped we could talk more when everyone was calmer. I said sure. She hung up. I sat with my phone in my hand for a few minutes. Then I forwarded my cousin the email I'd sent Fletcher. My cousin, bless her, genuinely, she is the unsung hero of this story. Replied in about 4%. She said she'd seen another post in the church group. Would I like to know? I said yes. This one was from Fletcher's wife again, posted 2 days earlier, which meant it was after our phone call. She wrote about navigating difficult family dynamics during the newlywed period. She wrote about how generosity can sometimes become a tool for control. She wrote about praying for boundaries that honor both the giver and the receiver. It had 32 likes. People had commented things like "stay strong," and "you two are handling it with such grace." I read it twice. I didn't feel the thing I expected to feel, that hot spike of humiliation. I felt something quieter, recognition, the kind that comes when you finally see the shape of something you'd been sensing for a long time. She was rewriting it again. Before I'd even said anything publicly, she was laying the groundwork. Making me the controlling one, the grudge holder, the difficult older sister who couldn't let people live their lives. She was 3 steps ahead of me. The thing about people who are skilled at this is that they count on you staying quiet. They build their story in the assumption that you'll absorb it the way you've absorbed everything else. What they don't anticipate is the moment you simply stop. I don't have a huge social media presence. I'm not a Facebook person, not really. I use it to see photos of people's kids and occasionally post when I'm somewhere interesting. But I have a decent following on Instagram and I know how to write clearly. I'm a nurse. Writing clearly is part of the job. I posted on a Friday evening. No names, no tagged accounts, no accusations that couldn't be verified. Just the facts. I had financially supported a family member over the course of several years. The most recent contribution was a $300-400 sum described to me as a loan used for a honeymoon trip. The recipients had publicly attributed this gift to another source and had since framed my request for repayment as controlling behavior. I had documentation of all transactions. I was posting this not out of anger, but because I had recently realized that my silence had been mistaken for complicity, and I was no longer comfortable with that. I included a screenshot of the bank transfer. I did not include the church group posts. I didn't need to. By Saturday morning, I had over 200 comments. By Sunday, people I hadn't spoken to in years were reaching out. Some were sharing their own versions of the story. Different relationships, different amounts, same pattern, the same invisibility, the same slow erasure. Fletcher called me twice on Saturday. I let both calls go to voicemail. His wife texted me something long that I read once and did not respond to. My mother texted to say that Fletcher was upset and asked if we could handle this privately. I told her I had tried to handle it privately for weeks. She didn't reply to that. What came next surprised me, though it probably shouldn't have. My brother's best man, a guy I've met maybe 6 times in my life, decent enough, never had any reason to think about him particularly, sent me a direct message on Saturday afternoon. He said he'd seen the post. He said he wanted me to know that Fletcher had told him, before the wedding, that family had covered the honeymoon. He said he'd assumed it was my parents. He said when he realized it was me, he felt sick. He said, for what it's worth, I told him at the time that he should say something. That message undid me a little. Not dramatically, I didn't cry. I just sat with it. Someone had told him. Someone had said the right thing. And Fletcher had made a choice. The following Tuesday, I received an email from Fletcher. It was 3 paragraphs long. The first paragraph said he was sorry if I felt hurt. The second paragraph explained that the honeymoon acknowledgement had been an oversight and that his wife had meant no disrespect. The third paragraph said he was going through some things and that he'd be in touch about a repayment plan soon. I've responded with 1 sentence. Please have a plan to me by Friday. He did not respond by Friday. He responded the following Monday with a proposal to pay back $500 over the next 12 months, which was roughly 1/7 of what he owed, and said he hoped we could move forward as a family. I looked at that email for a long time. Then I did something I hadn't planned to do. I forwarded the entire email thread, the original loan request, my recap email, his non-responses, the final $500 proposal, to my parents. Not as an attack. Not to cause a scene. Just to make sure the people who kept telling me to handle things privately could see what private handling had produced. My dad called me that afternoon. He is not a talker, my dad. He's the kind of man who expresses things sideways. He'll fix something around your house instead of saying he loves you. He'll send you an article instead of asking how you're doing. He called me and he said, I didn't know it was this much. I said, I know. He said, I'm going to talk to him. I said, okay. He said, you should have said something sooner. I started to say something sharp back, and then I stopped. Because he wasn't wrong exactly. I should have. I hadn't because I didn't want to make things hard, didn't want to be the difficult one, didn't want to need anything from anyone when I was so used to being the one who didn't need anything. That was on me too, some of it. Not all of it. But some. I said, you're right. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, you did a good thing for him. That was it. That was all. But from my father, that was everything. 3 weeks after the Instagram post, Fletcher sent me a Venmo request. Well, not a request, a payment. $500. No note. Just the money. landing in my account on a Wednesday morning. I didn't thank him. I acknowledged receipt in a one-line email and noted the remaining balance. Things with his wife are what they are. She hasn't spoken to me directly since the phone call. She posts occasionally on Instagram. Couple photos, brunch photos, quotes about protecting your peace. I don't interact with any of it. I'm not angry at her the way I was. Anger takes energy. I've stopped volunteering. My mother and I have had 2 long conversations since all of this, the kind we don't usually have. She told me she'd watched me absorb things for years and never said anything because she thought it was what I wanted, to be the strong one, the capable one, the one who didn't make things complicated. She said she should have paid more attention. I told her she could start now. She said, okay. My cousin and I have dinner every few weeks. She is now my favorite person in the extended family, which wasn't true a year ago, and life is strange that way. My cat is fine. I finished the tea eventually. Here's what I know now that I didn't know before, or maybe knew but couldn't say out loud. Being capable is not the same as being obligated. Being the person who figures things out does not mean you sign up to fund other people's lives without acknowledgement. Being strong doesn't mean you disappear into someone else's story and smile while you do it. I spent a long time thinking that asking to be seen was the same as being needy. That wanting credit was the same as being petty. That saying, "This isn't okay," would make me the difficult one, the one who ruined things, the one who couldn't just let family be family. The truth is that silence kept me safe from one specific kind of discomfort, the discomfort of conflict, while quietly building another kind, the kind that hollows you out, the kind that turns you into a person who stands in a grocery store saying, yeah, to a lie about her own money. I'm not that person anymore, not because everything got fixed. It didn't, not entirely, maybe not ever. But because I stopped confusing invisibility with peace. They're not the same thing. One is chosen, and one is done to you. And I'd had enough of the kind that was done to me. I still work nights in the cardiac unit. I still know how fragile things are. Bodies. Yes, but also the stories we tell ourselves about who we are to each other, about what we owe, about what's okay. The fragile ones aren't always the ones we expect. If you've ever transferred money to someone who rewrote the transfer as their own effort, if you've ever smiled through a toast where your name wasn't mentioned, if you've ever driven home in silence after being present at something that pretended you weren't, I want you to know I understand that particular kind of tired, and I want you to know it's not yours to keep carrying.